What is a network? A whole lot of people have had interest in networking for a long time. I've met plenty students who at camp will tell you, I want to do networking. Everybody's doing networking. So, what is networking? What is it about? What do you need to know about it? We're going to be discussing that in this movie. It's networking is broad, very broad, I must tell you. But I'll try to break this series as short as possible, so that we don't end up spending um, a lifetime trying to explain it. Okay, it's a large thing to discuss. Okay, and that's why, of course, Cisco decided to dedicate an entire curriculum, which actually spans a whole year, to train networking. But I'll just try to break them down and give us the basics, so that at least to an extent you should be able to say with confidence that you can do some networking. All right. So we're going to start first with a description of what a network is, and to describe that, I'm going to show you this small picture here. Um, we can easily see a computer here and a computer here, and then a line in between. Yes. Okay. Now this is what we call a network. Let's explain that. Let me just write it in between. This is a network. Yeah, what we have here is a network. So let's explain what that means. Now we see that computer or PC0 and PC1 are connected by means of a wire, okay, or a cable. I'm trying to flow at our level. Okay, this is a cable and it's connecting the both of them. And the reason for the fact that these two computers have been connected, we have a network. Some people's head are like, eh. All right, if you guys remember in camp, we talked about this, and we were making reference to what happens when you're trying to transfer files from your cell phone to another cell phone via Bluetooth. And we explained that for the fact that you already established a form of Bluetooth service to enable you connect to the other person, you're participating in the network. Now, in the case of your Bluetooth, it is a kind of wireless connection, and so you do not necessarily need to connect a cable to the next phone before you can transfer. And so in your computer, we find that possible. You could actually connect a computer to another computer by means of a cable, or you could connect a computer to another computer by means of the computer's wireless interface. Okay, so it's possible to connect a computer wirelessly or via wire. I like to look at networking first from the wired perspective, because that's where it actually started from, and when you understand it better, it makes the whole learning process fun. So we're going to stick to the whole wire process. So let's just then describe what a network is. So since these two computers are connected together, we can easily then say that a network is a connection of two computers. Sure? Yeah, two computers. So let's just add the definition a little further. So we could then say that a network then is the connection of two or more computers. So a connection of two or more computers. Okay. For the purpose of sharing files and resources. That is what a network's definition is: a connection of two or more computers for the purpose of sharing files and resources. Of course, that then simply means that it's possible that PC0 has something that PC1 needs, but PC1 doesn't have it. And so the only way that PC1 can get what PC0 has will be to connect to PC0 and pick the item from PC0, so that PC1 now has it. That's simple. So it could be a song, it could be a movie, it could be a document, it could be a picture, whatever file or resources. It could actually even be something that PC0 can access that PC1 cannot access directly. Probably a printer. If PC0 has access to a printer and PC1 doesn't, PC1 can decide to use the printer through PC0. That is a resource. Okay, so that is essentially what a network is. Okay, so taking it further now to where our whole networking thing comes in, is that we'll find mostly situations where you probably walk into a cafe and you see more than one computer arranged there. Isn't that so? Yeah, you probably see plenty computers and you're wondering, okay, how is it that these computers are connected to each other? right? That is networking. Okay, so in the case of we now having several computers that are connected together, the question now is, are they connected, are their connection only through one cable, or is it more than one cable? Remember we showed you this section, I showed you a part of this on my computer. Yeah, a port like this, you remember? Yes, I showed you a port like this, and we understood that most computers would only have one of these ports, right? And so it's very almost impossible for you to have two cables connecting to one computer. And so what will be the device that you would need to connect two, more than two computers? That is where we talk about introducing a device called a switch. Yeah, either a switch or a hub, or probably yeah, either a switch or a hub. Yeah, all of these generally allow you to have extra ports. So in the case of your hub, this is what it will look like. This is the behind of the hub. You could see that as it is, the hub has several ports, right? And so what simply happens then is that this cable that you have that is connecting each of these computers, all right, would simply be attached from one computer to any of these ports, giving you more connectivity. So if probably we had 6 computers that will be connected to the network, we just need to connect them to the hub and we're good to go. If we wanted more than that, we could then use a switch. We could use a switch, and the switch will give us plenty port. Like in the case of this Cisco Catalyst 2950 series switch, it has about 24 ports, meaning that you could actually connect 24 computers to this particular switch, and they all would communicate in one network. And so if we're trying to look at that now using the topology here, what would then be meaning by that is that we would have computers here. Okay, I'm just going to add just a few more. Okay, let's remove this connection that we have between these guys. Okay, and then let's replace the connection here with a different one. Okay, just like that, like that, like that. Now notice that the kind of cable that I am using here now, when compared to the one we used initially to connect the other two computers on their own, is different. I don't know if you noticed that. If you didn't notice that, this is the good time for you to pause now and rewind so that you see that. But if you notice that, you'd realize that we used a cable that was a little dotted or dashed. That's this, and you can see the title name just below as copper crossover, whereas this one I am using is a copper straight through. And if you remember in camp, we explained what those cables are meant for. And so by for argument's sake, and to make sure that you guys remember, we said that a straight through cable will be used to connect devices that are not similar or unlike devices, whereas your crossover cable will be used to connect like devices. You remember that? Okay, so having mentioned that, now we could then go back to what we're saying. So with the introduction of the switch at the middle, it's now possible for we to have several uh, computers connected on the network. We understand this concept, yes? All right, so having mentioned that, now we're then simply saying that in the broader sense of the word, we are generally connecting different computers to a network. Now going further, we could actually then connect networks to another network. You remember we said that, yes? And so that is where we then introduce what we will call a router. I think I mentioned a router. And so in Cisco, this is how a router is simulated. It's simulated this way. And so if probably I had, okay, let's duplicate this network and explain that. So I'm just going to copy this, all right, and drop him over here. Okay, so we have one network here and another network there. Let's shift you. All right, so we have one network here and another network here. So let's call this network A. All right, and then let's call this network B. So these two networks are here, and so to connect these two networks together, we would need a router, because a router tends to perform at a different level than a switch, and it's the guy that actually does the job of connecting networks together. And so if we're trying to connect these two now together, we need to now connect them using the right cable. So in this case, we're also going to be using a straight through cable, since a router and a switch are not operating at the same level. So would go in that way, and then would come over here and connect the two of them together. Okay, and we have the connection. So when these two networks are configured properly, we can now transfer files from this network to this network, and from this network to this network. Do we get that? So essentially then, that's what we then mean when we're trying to describe what a network is. So the internet, then just think of it as a connection of millions of routers that are connected to millions, or if not billions, of smaller networks. Did that sink in? The internet, a connection of millions of routers that are interconnected with millions or billions of networks. That is essentially what the internet then is. Now we just talked about, or we just showed you some cables, and so what really do these cables mean? We've explained it. We looked at how to crimp those cables on the on at camp, right? So let's just take a look at the color codings for these cables, just once more, just once more. I'll just open it for us on the net. Let's see. Network cables. Let's just see quickly on the internet what we have there. Just a second. Okay. All right. So if we're looking at this particular picture, you see different network cables arranged. Okay, and the one we worked out, or the type we used, was just this particular type here, and we saw how we could crimp them. If you recall, in camp we did that, and like we explained, we said that these cables are all intertwined together. I recall we doing that. Okay. uh, Now, so essentially, when you've been able to understand how to connect each of these cables, it makes a whole lot of sense. In fact, look at this particular picture that describes the color codes, the ones we used. If we remember, we talked about this color code where we started with white, orange, orange, white, green, or green, white, all the way to white, brown, brown. You see all of them arranged in the specific order according to the standard that was arranged by the TIA organization. And so you might want to pause and take a look at this and compare them to what we did, so that you'll be certain that we were not lost. But remember that, having mentioned that, we also mentioned the cable types that we use. We said we had straight through, we had crossover, and then we had rollover, if you remember, right? So it's a good idea to keep them in mind, so that it doesn't just leave your head, because the moment it leaves your head, it's going to be a problem for you to get it back. All right, fine. So next up, now we talked about the IP configuration, or the IP address, where we basically talked about how to configure the computer so that they could connect, and that was where we mentioned your IP addresses and how to configure them. And I remember talking about IP addresses in a specific order. We talked about the different classes of IP addresses. We talked about class A IP addresses. We talked about class B IP addresses. We talked about class C IP addresses, and we explained briefly how they all work, right? So if we are trying to take that a bit further, okay, if we're trying to take that a bit further, would say, all right, let's go with that particular search. We would say that for a IP for a class A IP address, this will be the range of what the numbers will look like. And so when we're trying to explain, I remember I told you I wasn't too sure of the exact ranges, so here you have them here. So for the class A IP addresses, any IP address that starts from 0 dot something dot something down to 127 dot something dot something, that is a class A IP address. A class B IP address starts from 128 to 191. A class C starts from 192 to 223. A class D starts from 224 to 239, and so forth. Okay, and all of these are explained, so feel free to visit the internet to see and explanations of what each of these ones do, what they are meant for. You're going to get a whole lot of information. Remember that we're just trying to do a summary, so I wouldn't want to explain everything, otherwise we'd end up entering into another Cisco class now. All right, now this particular slide I think would break them down from their subnet mask angle, where it talks about how many hosts they can have. Remember I was mentioning this, remember? So you could pause here and study this briefly. It should make some sense to you to a large extent. All right, so once you have the right IP address, the next thing now you could then start bothering about will be the configuration. And we said that when you're trying to do the configuration, it's quite simple. All you need to do is to click on start on your computer. I'm using Windows 8, and so I'm just going through the process kind of automatically. We said you click on start and then you click on control panel. And so from my start menu in Windows 8, what I will do now will be to open control panel from here. Alright, and then we said you'd go to network and internet. Alright, or from where would go to view network status and tasks. Alright, and then we'll go over to change adapter settings, from where we'll go to Ethernet, and then right click on Ethernet and then click on properties, from where we would get the menu bar or the pop-up menu, where you would go over to IP version 4 and click on properties, and then from there you would enter your IP address. Remember, okay, during class we entered an IP address, but by default it is always going to look like this, where you are set to obtain an IP address automatically. And so what you would then do will be to click on the radio button that says use the following IP address, and then you could then enter the IP address of your choice. So in the case of a class C address which we will be using, we could use 192.168.10. we use .20, so we could use any other figure, let's say .50 in this case. And we said your subnet mask will be entered automatically. Right, so we'll click on OK over there and then click on close. And so it then means that on every other computer on the network, maybe if we're going to this computer on this network, if this is 20.50, this would be 10.50, this would be 10.51. All right, let's just write that down quickly for this guy. So we'll be looking at this. The IP address is likely going to be 192.168.10.50, okay, whereas this one is going to be 192.168.10.51. all right, okay, let's go 52. Are we getting the idea? So for this guy will be .53, .54, .55, .56. okay, now since these other computers are on a different network, if we're going to be using something similar, something will change. All right, so we'll be looking at something like 192.168.11.4. so notice the difference. What's different about this? That is what changes between the third octet or the third number and the third number. So in the case of this one, the third number is 10. In the case of this, the third number is 11. So if you can remember now what we did about how we got the network number, right, where we compared using the ANDing rule, where we compared the subnet mask and the IP address, it made it so that we're able to identify the network number where that IP address was pulled from. You remember? So I think this would be a good time for you to bring out that note and still look at it again. Yeah, that should give you something nice to remember. Okay, so having configured the first computer, you can now go over to every other computer on the network following the same process to configure them, and you should be just fine, almost, except for just some few things. Okay, right. So that now brings us to where Cisco comes in. Yeah, so Cisco is the organization that generally trains you on how to basically do networking. Okay, yeah, on second thought, I think I should talk about this in the next slide, so that this would sink in, so that we can then go ahead with it in the next slide. Hope that's okay with you guys. Cool. So I would see you guys in a jiff.